Hi everyone, this is William from the Headphone Experience, and I'm here tonight with something a little bit different. Instead of a review, this is more of a helpful video, hopefully, to some people. There's just so many different types of headphones and earphones, and just so many choices right now that I'm sure a lot of people that are new into the hobby don't even know where to start. So I thought maybe I'd throw this little video together and just kind of go over the different types of headphones and earphones, and maybe maybe it would give some idea of where, what direction to go. And like I said, it can be really confusing. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the different types of earphones and headphones, and basically I'd consider an earphone anything that fits in the ear, and a headphone anything that goes on or over the ears. And I want to talk a little bit about the pros and cons of each different type and what they're good at and what they're not. So I'm going to start out with earbuds, and got a little pair of Apple earbuds here for an example to start with. And basically what earbuds do is they go in the ear, but they do not go into the ear canal. They just sit in the outer ear, and they don't form a tight seal. The advantages to earbuds is they're usually pretty inexpensive, although they can go up into the $150, $200 range. I have seen them that high. But they're small, they're light, they're usually very easy to drive, and they're real good with portable devices like phones, that sort of thing. I mean, Apple made these for their iPhones. The disadvantage of the earbuds is, and the problem I have, I'll be honest, I'm not a huge fan of earbuds. And the problem I have is usually I have to move them around a lot to get the sound right. And then once I finally do, I get them in just the right position where they sound good. If I move around too much, they usually move and I lose that good sound. And they can, to me, get irritating after a while. I really don't like things in my ears. So they can move around a little bit, and usually you can get pretty decent bass out of some of these. Not real good sub bass. Earbuds are not known for sub bass, but you can usually get some pretty good mid bass if you get them in the right position. But my problem has been trying to keep them in the right position. So, and also you can get earbuds either wired or Bluetooth. IEMs are next on my list, and the difference with an IEM, and here's a pair of these are Venture Electronics, the bonus IEM, and the difference is you can see they've got a little rubber plug on them, and basically what they do is they actually go into the ear canal, and the idea is you want this little rubber seal here to form a tight seal in the ear canal. And that does a couple things. Number one, it gives you great isolation. There's nothing better than IEMs for isolation, which means not only keeping outside sound out, but keeping the sound of the music in. I mean, when you're wearing these, unless you have them turned up to an outrageous volume, probably nobody's going to hear them. And if you have a tight seal, you're going to block out most of the outside sound. So as far as isolation, there's nothing going to be better than an IEM. Like earbuds, they're small, they're light, they're usually pretty easy to drive. There are exceptions. They can start out very inexpensive. This pair here is about $20, and to be honest, these sound as good or better than most $100 headphones. So you get more for your money as far as sound quality from an IEM than you would from a full-size headphone. Like I said, I mean, a $20 IEM can sound like a $100 headphone. IEMs can have excellent sub bass as long as you've got that tight seal. A lot of them, including these, can create an excellent amount of sub bass and good solid weight to the mid bass. The bad points, for me, is just trying to get them in and out, trying to get the seal right. And once again, I'm not a big fan of anything in my ears. And to tell you the truth, I can only wear IEMs for maybe 45 minutes to an hour tops before it actually starts irritating my ears and I actually start getting pain. So I'm not really that much into IEMs, and I know IEMs can go way up there in price. I mean, I've seen IEMs like in the 2,000, 2,500 price range, and I'm sure they sound incredibly good. I've never heard any of the expensive IEMs, and just because of the fact that, you know, I don't like to wear them for any length of time, so it's not worth it to me and to invest a whole lot of money in IEMs. Next, I'm going to go with on-the-ear headphones. And to give you an example, this is a pair of Grotto SR80Es, and this is an open back. And I believe that over-the-ear headphones, most of them are probably open back, but I think there are a few closed back there. But basically what this does is it sits on the ear. It doesn't go over the ear or wrap around the ear. It sits on the ear. And the advantages of these are they're usually a little lighter and smaller than a full-size over-the-ear headphone. They're usually pretty inexpensive, even though I've seen over-the-ear headphones up into probably the $600-700 a pair range. They can get up there a little bit. And if it's a closed back, it might provide a little bit of isolation as far as outside noise, keeping it out, but the open back's going to create little to no isolation. They're usually pretty easy to drive, and like IEMs and earbuds are usually pretty good to use as a portable headphone, using it outside the home with a portable device like your phone or, portable, DAC amp of some sort. Excuse me a second. Next, I'm going to get into over-the-ear headphones, which is primarily what I listen to and primarily what I've been reviewing. And over-the-ear headphones are going to be your largest and heaviest headphones, and in most cases your most expensive. I mean, they have a huge price swing. I mean, you can get over-the-ear headphones for probably as little as $20, or they can go up to $6,000 a pair or even higher. I mean, there's almost no limit to what you could spend on a pair of over-the-ear headphones. They can be an open back design or a closed back, and here's an example of an open back over-the-ear headphone. This is the Hifiman Aria that I have in, or Aria, that I'm reviewing right now, which is a full-size over-the-ear headphone. And as you can see, it's got a grill on it, and the backs are open, so these provide almost no isolation in or out for sound. But as you can see, they fit completely over my ear. They wrap around and touch my head all the way around the ear, so my ear isn't even touching the headphone at all. And then to give you an example of a closed back, this is the Kennerton Magni. When, as you can see, the back of this headphone is closed and sealed. And once again, this goes over the ears, but the back is sealed. And I will talk about open versus closed back a little more in depth in a minute. But anyway, full-size headphones, full-size over-the-ear headphones can use basically three different types of drivers. You've got your dynamic drivers, you've got your planar magnetic drivers, and you've got your electrostatic drivers. Sorry. Full-size headphones can be anywhere from very efficient enough that you can drive them with a phone, or they can be extremely hard to drive, where you need a very powerful large desktop amp to drive, and some over-the-ear full-size headphones are so inefficient that people are actually using speaker amps and wiring the headphones directly to the speaker taps of, like 50 watt, even higher, larger speaker amps. So some over-the-ear headphones need a whole lot of power, and for that reason they're not a very good choice for portable use. They can be fairly light, like this little Kennerton Magni here. I think weighs about 380 grams or whatever. Pretty light. Or even the Hifiman here just weighs a little over 420 grams. Or I've seen full-size headphones as heavy as 600 grams, and they can be quite heavy. Personally, the weight of a headphone really doesn't bother me, but some people it can bother quite a bit. A full-size headphone can be either wired or it can be Bluetooth. And like I said, they're not ideal for portable use. They're usually just too big, too heavy, and if it's open back, they provide no isolation at all. And they're usually best for just sitting home, plugging them into a desktop amp or your high-end stereo system and sitting back in a big chair. And I usually end up asleep by about the third song, but that's my favorite way to listen to headphones. So I did want to go in depth just a little bit more about open back versus closed back. And there are headphones that are considered semi-open back. And like I said, an open back, basically you've got a grill on them and the back of the driver is open. So number one, they let the outside sound in, and you're going to hear pretty much everything in the room, and they're going to let the music out. Okay, the advantages to open back, though, is you usually get a larger sound stage. You get a more open sound, you get sound out a lot further away, you can even get more depth to it. Usually, though, most open backs struggle to get real deep into the sub bass. There are some that have very good sub bass, and in fact, this is the version 3 of the Hifiman, the stealth version, and this actually has very good bass. The closed back, they have their advantages too. A closed back full-size headphone, not only it covers the ear, and with it being closed on the back, it blocks out a lot of the outside sound. I mean, it's not going to block out everything. An IEM with a tight seal will actually block out a little more sound, but some closed back headphones do a very good job of blocking out outside sound, and they do a much better job than the open back headphones of keeping the music in, so you don't bother the people around you. If someone's sitting a couple feet away from you, they're probably not going to hear your music, or just barely hear it if you're wearing a closed back headphone. Another thing with closed back, another advantage is it's easier for them to produce deep sub bass. So most closed back headphones are going to have good bass, both mid bass and sub bass, and a lot more weight to the bass. Not always the case, there are exceptions, but usually people that want a headphone with a lot of bass are usually going to be happier with a closed back headphone, where someone's looking for a more neutral, more accurate, with no emphasis on the bass, whatever, they're probably going to be happier with an open back because you get that larger, more open sound to them. As far as the different types of drivers, like I said earlier, a headphone like this can use either a dynamic driver, a planar magnetic driver, or an electrostatic driver. And basically a dynamic driver, it's like a little speaker. They're usually round, and it's usually a cone shape, but there are exceptions to that too. The Hifiman the Sennheiser HD800 uses a ring driver, which is basically, it's kind of the same thing. It's a piston that moves in and out, but it's a ring instead of a cone. But most dynamic drivers, you have a cone shaped, it just looks like a small speaker, in this case it'd be about, 2 inches in diameter, and moves in and out. It uses magnets, and the power comes in, the signal comes in, and causes a reaction with the magnets, and the speaker moves in and out. That's what makes your sound. Okay, then you have planar magnetic headphones, and I did want to mention that the dynamic type drivers are in most cases easier to drive, but some of them have a high impedance and are a little bit harder to drive. Planar magnetic headphones use a completely different design. What they use is a sheet of a thin, like a diaphragm, and it usually has aluminum etchings on it, tracing of like a coil or a zigzag back and forth, and that is in between two banks of magnets. You have magnets usually on the inside and outside, sometimes only on one side. But anyway, current goes through the coil on this diaphragm, and that reacts to the magnets and causes the diaphragm to vibrate back and forth. And they have some advantages in most cases. The planar magnetic, not all cases, but in most cases they're a little more detailed. They can have very good detail, very clean, crisp. It's a very fast moving because it has very little mass. And but they can struggle a little bit with sub bass. Some of them do have very good sub bass, but not all planar magnetics. Usually the dynamic drivers are better at producing sub bass. Excuse me. The other issue with planar magnetic drivers is they're usually a little more power hungry. They usually take a little more amp behind them to drive them, and that's not always the case either. There are some planar headphones that are fairly easy to drive, but others are very difficult. The ones I mentioned earlier, like the Hifiman HE6 or the Hifiman Sesvara, those are very commonly driven directly from speaker amps from the speaker taps. They need that much power. Most planar magnetic headphones are somewhere in between, but they usually don't make good portable headphones. There are some portable units out there that will power some of the easier to drive planar magnetics, but most of planar magnetics just need too much current for a portable device to really make them sound good, and in most cases a planar magnetic headphone is going to sound better from a large desktop type amp. And then last, we've got the electrostatic drivers, which is another design where my understanding of electrostatic is they're similar to the planar magnetics, except they don't use magnets. Instead of a membrane surrounded by magnets on both sides, they have a membrane surrounded by just a metal mesh on each side. And I guess the idea is I think it puts a positive current into one of the metal sheets and the negative into the other, and then it feeds current through the membrane or whatever, and it reacts with the metal and it causes it to vibrate. And I've never owned or even reviewed or even heard a electrostatic headphone, but from what I've heard is they are exceptionally clean and detailed and can produce a very realistic sound. And but the disadvantages are, from what I've heard, electrostatic headphones struggle to produce deep bass. They struggle to get into the sub bass, and also they require a special type of amp. You can't plug them into just a normal amp, and they have to use a special electrostatic amp, which uses a much higher voltage than normal headphones. So they're not going to work even from the best, desktop normal amps. They have to have an electrostatic amp. So, and then the electrostatic amp, you can't use that with your normal headphones unless it has outputs for both. There's a few headphone amps out there that do that. Then One of the other choices you have with headphones, first of all, some of them have a cable that is permanently attached, like these grottos here. Others have a removable cable. You can see here you got two 3.5 millimeter plugs here. And nowadays, most of your mid-fi and higher-end headphones are going to have a removable cable. That way you can change the cable, you can, upgrade your cable, you can go to a different kind of plug at the amp end, you can do whatever you want. Okay, and then with your full-size headphones, even your IEMs, different, IEMs too, even earbuds, you have a choice of wired, and by wired I mean the headphone is connected directly with a power cable from an amp, so you're producing or you're sending an analog signal from your amp to the drivers in your headphones, and that comes through a wire. Okay, there's another way they can be wired, and that's with a USB cable directly from a phone, a tablet, a computer, and a headphone like that has a built-in DAC. Your digital to analog conversion is done in the headphone, so you're sending a digital signal from your computer or your phone or whatever to your headphone through a USB cable. Usually they use USB-C connections, and then the conversion from digital to analog is done in the headphone. A little built-in DAC and a built-in amp and a built-in battery all in there, and then so you can listen to them from a portable device, but you're using the DAC and amp that's built into the headphone. Right now I'm reviewing the Hifiman Diva Pro, which is like that, although the DAC and amp and battery are in a separate little unit that clips onto the headphone. But you can listen to them wired, but from a digital signal coming from your source. And then the final option is you have Bluetooth. And as far as I know, you can get earbuds, IEMs, probably on ears and over-ear headphones, all in Bluetooth, which is where you're running completely wireless. You have no wires attached to your headphones. You have a Bluetooth source, such as your phone or your tablet or your computer, and you are picking up that signal with your headphones. Usually the range is about 30 feet. But then your headphone takes that Bluetooth signal, which is digital, and converts it internally through an internal DAC, and they have a built-in amp and a battery source or battery pack in it, and you the conversion's done in your headphone, and you listen completely wireless. And Bluetooth has had sort of a reputation of not having the sound quality of being wired, but they're coming I guess they're improving Bluetooth all the time. And I gotta be honest, I'm reviewing that little Hifiman Diva right now, which is, it's not a cheap headphone. It sells for I think $329, but in my opinion is a lot of headphone for the money. And to be honest, the Bluetooth I think sounds almost as good as wired. It's up there real close. And I'm not even sure what code or codecs my computer or my laptop or my tablet are using. And there's probably something better out there. So from what I've heard, the newer versions of Bluetooth are right there almost, in the same place as wired. So my experience has been it's just a little bit less sound quality, and when I say less, basically a little bit flatter sound is what I'm hearing. I'm not hearing quite as much as of a three-dimensional layered sound stage with depth to it. I'm just not getting quite that with Bluetooth. But as far as the tone, the music in general, I mean, it sounds the same. It sounds really good. So, Bluetooth, like I said, they're advancing it, and from what I've heard, it can be as good as wired sounding. And then, oh, where am I going? Oh, sorry, I lost my place there for a second. I did want to mention ANC, which is active noise canceling. And I believe that there's IEMs with that now. I'm not sure, but I know you can get, full-size over-the-ear headphones with active noise canceling, and that's usually going to work best with a closed-back headphone that is blocking out most of your outside noise, because that's your start. That's your passive noise canceling, is just the headphone itself blocking out the outside noise. Then the active noise canceling, the way that works is your headphone will have little microphones in it, and it will listen for outside noises. It takes that outside noise and it processes it, and what it does is it produces an equal but opposite sound, basically 180 degrees out of phase to the original sound, and it plays that through the speakers. And the idea is the equal and opposite sound out of phase with the original will cancel out the original sound, and it is pretty effective and it does work pretty well. I don't have a whole lot of experience with active noise canceling headphones, but the ones I have tried, they do a pretty good job of canceling out that outside noise. One other thing I did want to mention is going back to the dynamic drivers or the planar magnetic drivers. It's been my experience through my reviews that the planar do not react as well to EQ or equalization, especially in the bass. The planar headphones, like I said, most of them struggle to get into the deep sub bass. Some of them struggle to have a lot of, dynamics to the bass, a lot of punch. And I'll tell you what, though, this Hifiman is the exception. The new Stealth has incredible bass. Not the most bass I've ever heard, but it's got very punchy, very solid, very strong bass, and even goes quite well in the mid bass. But in general, usually a lot of planar magnetic headphones they're neutral in the bass. They don't have an emphasis to the bass. And if you do want to emphasize it with EQ, they usually don't respond as well as dynamic drivers do to a boost in the bass. They will increase a little bit, but they don't increase as much as a dynamic driver would from the same amount of adjustment with your IQ or EQ. And they can tend to get a little bit, the bass can loosen up a little bit. It can get a little, I'm not going to really say boomy or muddy, but it can lose a little bit of its quality if you try to boost it too much through EQ, where dynamic driver headphones usually are more dynamic to start with. They usually have a little more punch to the bass, and they usually respond better to trying to boost the bass through EQ. They do, it'll get stronger without distorting as long as your amp is putting out enough power to supply what you need for that extra bass. Because remember, if you boost the bass by 3 decibels on your headphone, which is a pretty small adjustment, a lot of EQs, like the shit low-key, will boost as much as 12 decibels, or the bass boost button on like i5 amps like the Zencan, that sort of thing, boosts as much as 12 decibels. Well, a 3 decibel boost doubles your power you need from your amp. If you boost by 6 decibels, now you've quadrupled the amount of power you need. So you got to be careful with that. You can an amp that's perfectly fine driving a headphone when the frequency is flat can very quickly run into clipping and distortion when you try to boost the bass, especially giving it a heavy boost. Sometimes I like to mess with EQ, but I try not to EQ a headphone more than about 3 decibels. If I need to boost the bass more than 3 decibels with a headphone, I figure that that's probably not the right headphone for me. So I need to find a headphone that's more, has a tone balance more to my liking, so I'm not trying to boost it too much. So if you are a person that likes a lot of bass, you're probably going to want to go with, most of the time you're going to be better off with a dynamic driver in your headphone, and if you really like a lot of bass, you're probably going to be better off with a closed back. Like I said, open back, most of them struggle to get, put out a lot of deep, punchy bass. So anyway, I guess I've covered everything I wanted to, and I'm going to wrap this video up. So hopefully this will give you a few ideas of which direction to go, especially those of you that are newer into the headphone hobby and might look at all these choices and just have no idea, and at least this will give you an idea of where to start. Do you want to run your headphone from a portable device? Well, you're probably going to want to go with earbuds or IEMs, or maybe a smaller, on-the-ear headphone. Are you going to sit at home and listen to it at your desk, or, sitting in your recliner? Then you're probably going to want to go with the full-size over-the-ear headphone, and then if you've got the amp to drive it, how efficient the headphone doesn't really matter, but that's the whole thing. You got to match up your headphone and your amp. You can't. So many times I've seen in my headphone group, the Headphone Experience on Facebook, so many times I'll see someone buy a really hard to drive planar magnetic headphone, like one of the Hi-Fi Man or something like that. And they take this really, this full-size, hard-to-drive planar headphone and then plug it into a portable device and then wonder why it doesn't sound good. And, they're not made to do that. These hard-to-drive planar magnetic headphones are made to be plugged into a substantial desktop amp that puts out some power. And, and then the other way around. Okay, you don't want to take a super efficient earbud or IEM and plug it into an amp that's capable of putting out 12 or 15 watts per channel, because with that kind of gain, you're probably going to hear background hiss from the amp with a very efficient, IEM or earbud or whatever. Even some headphones, even some full-size headphones are very efficient, and you don't want to hook them up to a super powerful amp because you will hear the noise floor of the amp. So it's kind of all about matching and synergy and just getting the right headphone for the right amp. Some I didn't mention was impedance. Some headphones have a very low impedance, maybe 16, 20 ohms, and usually in that case they're pretty easy to drive. Not always the case, but usually. And then some have a very high impedance, like 300 ohms or 600 ohms. Well, if you get into a 600 ohm headphone, you're almost always going to be better off with a tube amp, because a high impedance headphone needs a high amount of voltage, versus the planar magnetic headphones usually have a low impedance and they need a lot of current to produce, solid bass and sound good. Where a high impedance headphone, like 300 ohm, 600 ohm, they usually need an amp that's capable of putting out high voltage and not so much current. Well, what happens to be, fit that spot real good is tube amps, especially OTL type tube amps. That's an output transformer-less tube amp, which is capable of putting out high voltage but not a real high amount of current. So if you have an OTL type amp, you're going to want to go with a dynamic driver and a high impedance. A planar magnetic headphone that's hard to drive isn't going to match well with your OTL amp. So, it's kind of all about matching up your amp or your portable device or whatever, and finding the right headphone that is going to match up. And once you find that, you can get incredible sound, and you don't have to spend a huge amount to do it either. I've heard some really good systems, that only cost a couple $100 to put together. So, you don't have to jump in all the way. If you're new at this, start out, with $100 pair of headphones, $100 amp, right here, this little amp here. I guess you can see it in the background. This is the Hi-Fi Zen DAC. It's a combination USB DAC and headphone amp. I think it sells for, I think it was $169. I think it might be $199 now. But that's going to connect your USB source, and it's got enough power for most headphones. And you hook that up, to a good, $100 headphone. You've got a good start there. So. And don't be fooled either. You probably go on to headphone groups and you hear about these, $1,000, $2,000, $5,000 headphones. And yeah, they are great. They do sound incredible. But they're probably not as great as you're imagining them to be. Basically, with headphones, you got to double the price to get about 10% better. Doubling the price doesn't mean the headphone's going to be twice as good. Doubling the price means maybe 10% better. So you go from $500 to $1,000 for a headphone, you maybe got 10% better. And now you got to go to $2,000 to get another 10% better. And that's not always the case. And once again, it's all subjective. You might prefer a $200 headphone over a $1,000 headphone because it's tuned the way you like it. And there's no perfect headphone. Everyone likes, has different tastes, different choice of what they want. So that's what it's all about. It's about finding the headphone that's right for you. And the headphone's going to make far more difference in the sound than anything else. My advice is, if you're not happy with the sound, the first thing you do is you look for the right headphone. Okay, then when you find the right headphone, then what comes next is the amp. And then, matching up the right amp to that headphone. And the amp is going to make a much smaller difference than going from one headphone to another. Then after you find the right amp, you can, if you want to make small tweaks to the sound, you can look at DACs. And then last of all, cables. And yeah, I think some analog cables can make a small difference, but I don't believe it ever makes a night and day difference like some people think. That's the last step. After you get the right headphone, then the right amp, then the right DAC, then you mess around with cables and maybe make very small adjustments to your sound. But anyway, this video is going on way too long, so I'm going to cut this short. Hopefully, I've given some advice that helps you a little bit. If that's the case, please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, and you're all welcome to join us at the Headphone Experience on Facebook. We are up to, I think we're pushing 14.2 thousand members, so hope to see you there. Once again, thanks for watching my video.